In a world where a single game decides your fate, you're either the master or some poor basket plaything. A shady device lets you turn anyone into a servant if you can outplay them. Here comes Aya Arakawa, a sharp girl who hates bull. She ain't here to dominate, but she knows the game's just a twisted battle of manipulation. Trust is a death sentence, and every move could be her last. So the question is, will she play by their rules or flip the board? Let's see what happens. It all begins with a group of people playing card together. Among them, Sachi loses the game, acknowledging she's just bad at this game. But now it's time for a punishment game. As the rule goes, the first one to get out decides what the punishment is. In their case, it is a guy named Takio. However, the other two warn him not to ask Sachi to do anything intimate. Well, that's exactly what's going through Takio's mind as he smirks and asks Sachi to spend a night with him. The others take this as a lighthearted joke, but get surprised when Sachi actually agrees. We then discover that there's a device called SCM. The way it works is that the user has to win a duel against someone, and then the loser become their slave. Shortly after, we move to the Shinjuku station. There, a girl is telling about her breakup story to her friend Aya. However, the latter is completely lost in her thoughts. Snapping her back to the reality, the girl complains to Aya how she wasn't listening, but Aya actually heard everything her friend said, so she suggests that she meet her ex-boyfriend and his current boyfriend for whom he left this girl. At the meeting, the girl's ex, Yuga Ota, introduces himself, along with his boyfriend Shinosuke Tachikawa. There, Aya consults Yuga what she left the girl for. In response, Yuga agrees to tell her everything if she can guess what relation the couple beside them have. Since only Aya guesses it correctly, Yuga wishes to talk to her privately. Later, Aya reads a message where Yuga asks her to meet him at the boat dock at Ueno Park at 2 p.m. Inside the boat, Yuga and Aya end up meeting as planned. There, Aya asks him why he left her friend. Before answering this question, Yuga clarifies that he is not actually into guys and explains that he just used Shinosuke to get Aya's friend to leave him. Then, he questions Aya how she could guess about the couple. Aya explains that she had a feeling, adding that she noticed how the girl was trying to leave as soon as possible. She emphasizes that sometimes people lose interest with other people when they meet them. Hearing this, Yuga grows excited and tells Aya that he wants to talk more with her about something. Later in his apartment, the two engage in yet another conversation. Here, Yuga shows Aya the SCM device and explains that it turns people into slaves. We are then introduced to the couple from before. The girl, Lucy, actually met up Meguro, the guy, after finding him on the online dating app. The two decided to meet in real life. However, at Bay, things took a darker turn. Lucy didn't like how Meguro was in real life and wanted to leave, but Meguro ended up taking advantage of Lucy's body without her consent. This left a huge trauma for Lucy, and she decided to make full use of the SCM device. Later that day at an arcade, Lucy ends up meeting Meguro once again. This time, she is clingier and tells Meguro that she wants to have a duel with him. If she loses, she offers Meguro to have her body once again. Intrigued by the offer, Meguro ends up accepting the duel, and so Lucy asks him to place the SCM in his mouth. The game decided is simple. Whoever has the most balls in an hour wins. At first, Meguro is clearly shown to be the one winning, but all of a sudden, the odds change when Lucy points to a worker at an arcade. The worker then proceeds to bring Lucy's accumulated balls from earlier. Then, Lucy reveals that there was no rules against winning balls before the game even started. An angry Meguro then tries to rebel against Lucy, but he ends up becoming her slave. As soon as Lucy orders Meguro to get on his knees, his body moves on his own. Meanwhile, Yuga hands over the SCM manual to Aya, showing her these devices actually work. Aya thinks that Yuga is trying to get her to be his slave, but Yuga explains that it's quite the opposite. He actually wants her to be his insurance. Simply put, he wants Aya to make sure that she can bring Yuga back if he ends up losing a duel. Moreover, we discover that the SCM device can only be removed temporarily. However, if the device isn't placed back before long, then the slave will experience some mental issue or trauma. Aya questions Yuga how he can trust her when they have just met. In response, Yuga tells her that he trusts her intelligence and her sheer guts. Aya then asks Yuga why he is doing all of this. To this, Yuga explains that he is not interested in getting as many slaves as he can. Rather, he wants to test just how far he can go. He wants to put his abilities to use and find out what's its true potential. Moving us forward, Yuga asks Aya if she understands him. After about a minute of contemplation, Aya proceeds to hold back Yuga's hand, mentioning that she understands a bit. Aya then reminisces how she has always had this pent-up energy that she just wants to let out. She always wanted someone to understand her, without her explaining, and she found that someone in Yuga Ota. He even made her believe his story, but soon Aya will end up regretting ever meeting Yuga. The scene then shifts back to Lucy in her apartment, along with Meguro. She is sitting atop him, reading what she can do with the slaves. Turns out that the master cannot order their slaves slaves outside of their abilities. Moreover, the master cannot order their slave to hurt itself or manipulate their emotions. But Lucy finds a perfect way to get her revenge on Meguro as she continuously orders Meguro to punch himself. Doing all this, Lucy finds SCM to be quite fascinating. At some club, a girl and a guy is having a rock, paper, scissors match as a duel. The match is tough, but the girl ends up winning. Later, we are introduced to the girl as Ayaka and the guy as Seiya. There, Ayaka reveals to Seiya that she has always known about the SCM. Turns out that Seiya was actually trying to bait Ayaka into becoming his slave. She then asks Seiya why she would do such a thing, mentioning that she always requested for him whenever she came to this club. Moreover, Ayaka even spent tons of money on Seiya to make his life a bit better and to make him feel happier. When Ayaka asks Seiya what he did with all the money she gave him, Seiya explains that he bought himself a motorbike and a computer. On top of that, he went on a trip with his girlfriend, even though he told Ayaka that he was going on a trip by himself. Crying immensely, Ayaka cannot believe that she has been lied to so badly, and the person who lied was everything to her. But now that Seiya is her slave, Ayaka smirks, remembering that she can make him do whatever she wants. So she gets on the tables, drops her undergarment, and asks Seiya to pleasure her. As expected, Seiya obeys her command. Later, Ayaka realizes that the SCM rules won't allow her to manipulate Seiya's feelings, so she has to find a way to somehow get Seiya to like her. Meanwhile, Iya enters the same cafe where she met Yuga for the first time and receives a message from him, discovering that he will be late, so she proceeds to have her own lunch. Shortly after, Yuga arrives at the cafe as well and apologizes to Aya for being late. There, he shows her the map of SCM and explains how it works. Turns out that in the map, a square means initialized, which means that there is an SCM that's ready to be enslaved. Other than that, a triangle represents a slave that already has a master, and a circle represents the masters. Yuga further explains that the SCM starts to vibrate when another person with an SCM within a certain range is nearby, but this doesn't mean that a person with an SCM will always be found since there is a specific range. Yuga then shows Aya the pictures of Seiya and Ayaka, mentioning that they will be dueling them as their next target. On the other hand, Ayaka is happy and excited to move in with Seiya in his apartment, but after seeing Julia, Seiya's ex's belonging there, Ayaka starts raging, asking Seiya to throw out all her ex's stuff. Later, Ayaka realizes that she was way too rude to Seiya, and since this is supposed to be their happy day, she decides to head to the club to make Seiya's day special. However, things change when their SSCM starts vibrating all of a sudden, prompting Ayaka to realize that someone like them is close. Just then, Yuga and Aya reveal themselves, challenging Ayaka and Seiya to a duel. Seiya accepts the duel, but asks some privacy to consult with Ayaka first. During this, he tells Ayaka that he has got a plan. Going back to the table, Seiya suggests that they have a game of thumbs up. The game soon begins, and the battle is indeed intense. Seiya is the first one to go out, and he's a bit happy about it. Not long after, Yuga gets out as well. How this game works is that the last one to stay in the game is the loser. Ayaka takes a good look at Aya and sees that she is very calm. Moreover, Seiya is not helping Ayaka at all, and has not fulfilled the plan that he told Ayaka to trust on. This leaves Ayaka to realize that Seiya just wanted to get a new master as she cannot manipulate his emotions. Just like that, Ayaka ends up losing the duel as well. Just then, Yuga reveals that Iya is not wearing any SCM, explaining that he would have been the only one to be enslaved and Aya would have been his insurance. As anger takes over Ayaka, she remarks that this cannot be it, yelling that Seiya is hers. In response, Seiya punches her brutally, mentioning that he is not hers. When Seiya tries to hit Ayaka further, Yuga orders him to stop. As it's now time to leave, Yuga tells both of his slaves to live their lives as they want for now, but prohibits them from dueling with anyone else. As they are leaving, Iya asks Yuga why he did not set them free. In response, Yuga explains that they will be helpful in getting more slaves. Later, at the place where Seiya once met Julia, he reminisces about Julia rescued him from a life of misery. He also recalls about the event where he had to break up all ties with her because of Ayaka's orders. During that time, Seiya badly wanted to murder Ayaka, but the SCM device held back his grief and anger. He finally managed to find a way out of Ayaka's enslavement, only to be enslaved by Yuga Ota. It seems like Seiya might be doomed to be a slave. He hopes that he can one day find Julia through the SCM map as he regrets leaving her. However, it doesn't take long for his wish to be fulfilled as Julia approaches Seiya from behind, reminding him that this is where he proposed to her. In an instant, Seiya grasps Julia's hand tightly, telling her that he will never let go of her now. Julia then asks Seiya if he means he will lose if he lets go of her hand. Without thinking, Seiya says that he is betting on it, and just like that, without knowing, Seiya ends up starting a duel with Julia. Moreover, here Julia also reveals to Seiya that she has already found someone else, Master Ryo. Julia also has has a specific tattoo on her arm as she reveals to Seiya that she found a new master named Ryu when he broke up with her. At the same time, Julia pulls out her hidden SCM device, and Seiya is confused to see it. Julia explains that the slave can take out the device for some time, and that's how she was unable to be tracked when she was coming here. Placing the SCM back in her mouth, Julia begins to provoke Seiya that she cannot be his anymore. She continues saying that she belongs to someone else, to surprise Seiya so he can leave her hand and back off. As expected, that's indeed what happens. Seiya is shocked to hear all this, so he backs off and immediately feels that he has lost. Confused, he has no idea when he even started a battle. Julia reminds Seiya that he said he will lose if he lets go of her again. Now Seiya thinks that he is Julia's slave, but she explains that it's just temporary. How it works is that if two slaves duel with each other, the winner ends up temporarily become the master of the loser until they both meet their original master, and that's when the transfer occurs. Later, Seiya discovers a new website that he shows to everyone. In this website, the people uploads various experiments that they conduct on their slave, and yeah, it's as gruesome as it can get. There, they also see Julia, so Yuga asks Seiya about Julia's master, but Seiya doesn't respond, prompting them to realize that Seiya has been enslaved by Ryu, Julia's master. Yuga then suggests that they discuss their plan personally, where Seiya cannot hear them. Before leaving, he tells Seiya to tell his master to get ready for them. As they leave, Seiya bursts into tears, hoping that Yuga can find a way to set Julia free. The scene then switches to Shiori, a cosplayer engaged in a play. After being done, she gets out and starts walking home. There, she's approached by a girl who tells Shiori that she wants to be her slave. Later, the two sit at a cafe to talk more about this. The girl introduces herself as Adachi Nakano and says that she is just impressed by Shiori's prettiness and boldness, which is why she wants to be her slave. Thereafter, Nakano briefs Shiori about the SCM device, explaining how it works and all. But Shiori doesn't believe her at all and thinks that this is all just a mere game. But then a couple of guys approach the pretty ladies, offering to hang out with them. That's when Shiori comes up with an idea. She agrees to duel, and the game is to get these guys to spend money on them. The one who ends up with the most money spent on wins the duel. Shiori, with her boldness, and Nakano, with her cuteness, manage to rip these guys off a bit, way too much. Later, they end up at a bar and order the most expensive beer. Later, the four of them head to one of the guys' apartment. They soon start drinking, and Shiori brags how she can get his man to spend money on her drinks even. Not long after, Shiori loses her consciousness. The guy who was with Shiori starts panicking, and it seems like he was not in on the plan. When he turns to his friend, he finds that he laced Shiori's drink to take advantage of her. But Nakano loses her cool, turns over the table, and starts raging. Later, Shiori is sleeping on Nakano's lap. As she wakes up, Nakano starts to cry, telling Shiori that it's all her fault that she got her into this mess. Seeing that the tears are ruining her hair, Shiori attempts to caress them, but something unexpected happens. It appears that Nakano has been wearing a wig, and he's not even a girl, he is a guy. Nakano then apologizes, but there's nothing they can do since Shiori is his slave now. Just then, a mysterious man approaches the two, grabbing Shiori, thinking that she's the master. He then forces her to a duel of punch out and ends up enslaving her in no time. He then introduces himself as Zenichi Bunkyu. Moreover, he forces Nakano to accept him as his master as well, but he runs away as he was not enslaved by Zenichi. After running away, Nakano hides himself in between dumpsters, but soon he gets approached by Julia, who tells Nakano that he should remove his SCM device if he's being chased by someone. She then introduces herself and asks Nakano to tell her his problem. After Nakano pleads for her help, Julia agrees, but on one condition. She tells Nakano that he will have to be their ally if she helps them. A desperate Nakano agrees, so Julia takes him back to the car where Ataru Cho was waiting for her. Inside the car, Ataru tells Nakano that they don't trust him just yet, asking him to initiate a duel with Julia. Nakano agrees, and the duel is decided to be a rescuing game. If Julia rescues Shiori, then she is the winner. If not, then Nakano will win. However, when Julia sees the map, she sees that there are actually 3 SCM users in the area. When they reach the coordinates, Zenichi is shown to be in a duel with the same dog that Shiori fed when she was heading back with Nakano and the 2 guys. Moreover, seeing the dog, Nakano also realizes it as Zushi and explains to Ataru and Julia about all this. Meanwhile, the duel goes on in full flow. Before long, Zenichi finds it hard to keep up with the dog, as Zushi ends up biting Zenichi on his genitals, winning the duel, and Zenichi becoming a dog's slave. Zenichi is walking down the road when he gets approached by Ayaka, accompanied by her 2 men. These guys appear to be loan sharks as they ask Zenichi to pay his debts. As soon as one of the guys approach, Zenichi grabs his finger and snaps it. Not long after, the other guy rushes at Zenichi. He proceeds to grab this guy and smash his head on the wall, leaving him dead. There, Zenichi exclaims that he hates being bossed around. Just then, a guy a guy steps out of his car and appreciates Zenichi for his boldness. He then introduces himself as Mon Narima and tells Zenichi that he is looking for vigilantes like him. Later at Narima's office, the two engage in a conversation. There, Narima explains to Zenichi the line of work that he is in and asks Zenichi if he would like to work with him. That's when Zenichi accepted this guy's offer. The job? It's quite simple. All Zenichi has to do is to wear an SCM device and head out to find as many people as possible wearing an SCM and enslave them. For every person, Narima has agreed to give Zenichi 1 million. For some time, Zenichi has been doing this efficiently, but then he forgot about the SCM. Now, incidentally, he finds 2 women on the SCM map and decides to trade them off for 2 million. These 2 women are none other than Shiori and Nakano, with the latter revealing to be a guy. Moreover, Zenichi has now found himself in an unexpected situation, being enslaved by a literal dog. As the dogs and Zenichi's duel come to an end, Nakano immediately rushed to the field to wake Shiori up. After Shiori wakes up, Nakano once again blames it all on himself. Shiori then questions what happened with Zenichi, prompting Nakano to explain that he has been enslaved by Zushi Omaru. Just then, Ataru approaches Zenichi and begins insulting him for being enslaved by a mere dog. Moreover, he even asks Zenichi if he would like to be his slave, but Zenichi puts his ego up front, stating that the last thing he wants is to be bossed around. Seeing that there is no other way, Ataru begins to put his SCM on, but Nakano stops him, requesting to have the opportunity to enslave Zenichi. He then challenges Zenichi to a punch-out and knocks him out with a brick, winning the duel. Later, Nakano asks Shiori to do everything as these two say, since he made a deal. Meanwhile, Ataru is thinking about what to do with Zushi. He decides to take the dog with him, when suddenly Aya and Yuga arrive. Aya reveals herself to be the dog's owner. Then, Yuga steps forward and asks Ataru if he can speak, or whether his master, Ryuo, will be mad about it. As Ataru is leaving, Yuga offers to free him from slavery, but Ataru casually lights up a smoke, telling Yuga that he should stop lying to strangers if he wants them to trust him. Along the way, Aya has no idea how her dog, Zushi, ended up with an SCM device in his mouth. When she tries to take it out, Zushi moves his head away, indicating he doesn't want the SCM to be removed. Shortly after, they come to a stop, and Aya gets out of the car to inform someone that she has met Zushi and is heading home. Meanwhile, Yuga receives a message from someone asking for the debt to be paid. Yuga then apologizes, stating that he has spent all his money on insurance and gave it all to Aya. At the same time, he looks back at Zushi and winks at him. The scene then shifts to a guy named Zero Shinagawa. Zero is just a normal, hardworking guy who works all day and lives his life normally. He lives alone and has no one to rely on. One day, after he is done from work, Zero spends some time observing the beautiful nature. There, he gets approached by a young child who guesses that Zero works at nighttime. Moreover, this young guy requests Zero to help him win a duel against a guy who made his father go crazy. Simultaneously, he introduces Zero to SCM, but Zero apologizes and refuses to help. As he is leaving, the child exclaims that no one believes in him, triggering an old memory for Zero when he felt the same way, so he agrees to help. Later, the two find themselves near a cafe where this supposed guy is to meet them. This guy is none other than Ataru. He proceeds to sit on a bench as Zero and the child prepare for a duel. The game is decided to be a trivia quiz. In this game, there are 10,000 questions. The game will automatically select a random question, and whoever's turn it will be, they will have to tell the correct answer. The game is going as planned, and there doesn't seem to be any form of cheating taking place. Zero and the young child is about to win the game, as the latter has to give just one correct answer. The young child ends up telling the correct answer, and voila, they win. Nope, that's what everyone would expect, but there's a turn of events. The young child unexpectedly switches side and reveals that he has always intended to team up with Ataru. As for the story of avenging his father, it was all made up. It appears that Zero's world has turned upside down, and in every way he seems to have lost this duel. When Ataru reads the next question, Zero gives the wrong answer, and as a result, he loses the duel. When asked, the young child explains to Zero that he has no one to depend on, making him the perfect target for him to enslave. Another reason he gives is that it's fun to enslave a loner. Moreover, this young child is revealed to be the infamous Ryu. After enslaving him, Ryuo tells Zero that he is his master from now on. Sympathizing with him a little bit, Ataru tells Zero that he is going to be explained everything once he has calmed down. For now, he asks Zero to get inside the car. However, Zero appears to be resisting slightly. Just then, Ryuo asks Zero to obey Ataru's orders. This time, Zero manages to completely break free of the SCM effect, exclaiming, telling the two to not tell him what to do, and runs away. Later, Zero appears to have been tied tied up in the basement as Ataru questions Ryu if something like this has ever happened before, but Ryu answers this is the first time. Although he finds it weird at first, Ryu notices that Zero is obeying his commands now, and the rebellious act only ended for a short period of time. Ryu then asks Zero how much money he has saved up. After discovering that he has only 2 million yen, Ryu is not happy since this much money is not enough. Just then, Julia enters the basement, approaches the three, and tells Ryu that Zenichi has disappeared from the hospital with a note left behind. This note happens to be from someone who refers to themselves as the crazy person. In this letter, it is stated that the crazy person is willing to bet everything that they have and have a duel with someone whom they are looking for, but Ryu is upset by the fact that this crazy person stole one of his slaves and is determined to punish this person appropriately. Later that night, Shiori approaches Ataru and requests for a private conversation. They then head for a drive. There, Shiori inquires to Ataru how he became a slave. Ataru explains that he was just a normal guy who used to have a job of entertaining people and sometimes even taking them to girlies club. This is how he met Julia, who eventually enslaved him. The two started to get closer as time went by, and before Ataru knew it, he found himself on a date with Julia. That's where she offered Ataru to have a duel with him. The game was a color guessing game, and Ataru had to guess what colored undergarment Julia had on at that time. Turns out, Julia wasn't wearing any, and that's how Ataru was enslaved. When Shiori asks if they can be free, Ataru tells her to not even think about it. He explains that a certain feeling of terror takes over when a slave tries to go against their masters. So, the only best possible way for a slave to be free is for the master to verbally say so. Meanwhile, Yuga receives the same letter as Ryu from the crazy person. Aya suspects that the crazy person might be Ryu, but Yuga reveals that there is a third party involved since he was asked by Seiya if the letter was sent by him. Yuga then expresses fascination, wanting to meet this crazy person, but Iya opposes the idea, and when she sees that Yuga is losing his senses as he tries to force Ayaka to help him meet this crazy person, Aya grabs him by the collar, telling him to put a stop to all this. Yuga explains that he has always wanted to test his limits, reminding Aya that all his competitors have more than one slave, while he only has Ayaka. Pushing Aya to the ground, Yuga expresses how he thought Aya has the same mindset as him, but now he sees that she has completely changed, whereas on the other hand, Aya thinks the same. She also thinks that Yuga has changed drastically, so she tells Yuga not to include her in his plans anymore. Back at her home, Aya takes a good look at SCM, wondering what's so special about it that so many people want to use it. Just then, she receives a text message from the crazy person with a photo of Yuga in captivity. Moreover, Aya has been asked to meet the crazy person at a hotel room. When she reaches there, she sees a guy tied up to a chair, covered in a horse face mask, claiming to be the crazy person. But Aya immediately knows that it's Yuga. Yuga then takes Aya near the bathroom door, where Ayaka is following his orders, taking an ice bath. Moreover, the door is locked from inside, and no matter how hard Aya tries, the door stays put. To get Ayaka out of there, Yuga tells Aya that he wants to enslave Zushi as a means to make sure that Aya will always stay by his side. At first, Aya thought Yuga might want to enslave her, but that's not the case. Later, Yuga sets up the table for Zushi and Ayaka to have an eating contest. However, Aya notices that the plates are empty with only cutlery being present. That's when Yuga reveals that the things to be eaten are already there, the cutlery. Immediately, Ayaka starts to break the tiny scraps of metal from the cutlery and begins consuming them. On the other hand, Zushi is hesitant. He finally plucks up some of his courage and grabs the spoon. However, before things can escalate, Aya quickly pulls Zushi away, stating she cannot let Zushi consume things that are not meant to be consumed. After the duel ends, Aya is visibly angry with Yuga and his atrocious behavior, but Yuga explains that there will be no fun if he backs off now. Moreover, he reminds Aya how the battle is only getting more and more intense since he has not just one, but two competitors now. Furthermore, Yuga reveals that he is not actually the crazy person and that he just borrowed their identity to make his plan work. Aya believes that Yuga is still crazy nonetheless. Hearing this, Yuga thanks her for it, stating that's the nicest thing she could have said to him. Not only that, Yuga excitingly tells Aya that he loves her. Back when Aya went back to her home and reminisced about what's so special with this SCM, something was going through her mind. She had no idea why Yuga would go to such great lengths just to get as many slaves as possible. That's when she received a message from Yuga disguised as the crazy person. There, Zushi stares at Aya, wondering why she is being such a fool to help this guy so much, even though all he does is lie to her. Getting into his story, Zushi was owned by Aya. He was a completely normal dog, living a normal and a happy life. One day, in the area Aya, a delivery van stopped by. Inside the van, Zushi saw a female dog, and from the first sight, he fell in love with her. Zushi got so excited that he escaped Aya's house and went after the van, scurrying through the forest. But in the process, he ends up injuring himself and losing his way back home. There, he is found by two guys, Professor Sumida and Tsubaki Setagaya. Sumida then decides to adopt Zushi until he recovers from his injuries and takes him to his residence. Turns out, this is the professor who is the original creator of SCM, Slave Control Method. Since he was helped by Sumida, Zushi had to somehow pay his debts to him, so he decided to be his lab dog. The experiment was successfully conducted, however, not everything is rainbows. One night, Setagaya sneaks into the security room where he sees Zushiomaru guarding the data. Trying to stay as calm as possible, Setagaya quite easily injects Zushi with a tranquilizer, leaving him paralyzed. He then turns to the computer and accesses the SCM's data. There he steals all the research data, wanting to make this device to work on humans as well. As we all know, he was successful at the end. Sumida ended up taking all the blame for this incident, and so he was kicked out from the research lab. Retired, Sumida spent his time either with Zushi or staying idle most of the time. One day, he was holding the only remaining SCM device that he had, wondering what to do with it. Zushi then expressed to wear this device. It appears that Zushi wanted to use this device to track down Setagaya, make him pay for what he did, and that's how his beloved master, Sumida, would be happy. So he went out for a walk. But everything changes when he returns. Zushi's world is turned upside down when he sees that his master has hanged himself and ended his own life. That's when Zushi promised himself that he would make every single one of them pay and acquire his new name of Zushiomaru Sumida. Eventually, he ended up meeting the person he held close to his heart, Aya. But now Zushi worries as Aya worries too much for Yuga, even though he constantly lies to her. Somewhere else, inside a train, Yuga is being held hostage with a syringe pointed to his buttocks. The person behind him introduces herself as the crazy person, aka Fujiko Taito. Sensing that he is in a dangerous situation, Yuga secretly dials Ia's number, letting her listen to whatever's happening with him. Fujiko then challenges Yuga to duel, which he has to accept no matter what, but she ends up injecting him with a tranquilizer. When Yuga wakes up, Fujiko stands right in front of him, asking him if he can help her know more about a specific man. As she describes this man, Yuga realizes that this is his old friend, Shinosuke. Turns out that Shinosuke and Yuga used to live together, but the two parted their ways when Shinosuke expressed that he just wanted to sell SCM, whereas Yuga wanted to make full use of them. This is when Fujiko reveals that she has been collecting this many slaves just to present them all to Shinosuke once she finds him. Hearing this, Yuga realizes why Fujiko called herself as the crazy person. Soon, she tranquilizes him yet again. The duel has begun, and without Yuga's knowledge, the first person to see their mother will lose. At first, Yuga is confused about his whereabouts, but when he realizes what's really happening, it's already gotten too late. Yuga sees his mother and succumbs to Fujiko's slavery. After Yuga wakes up, he is angry that he lost. Soon, he receives a phone call from Fujiko, where she gives him only two orders. The first order is to meet Aya at a specific location, and the second order is to ignore all calls or texts from Aya. As Yuga waits at the designated location, Aya approaches him from behind, asking him not to turn around. The two then have a duel of rock, paper, scissors, and Aya very smartly ends up being the victor, enslaving Yuga. Oh, how the tables have turned. Aya then tells Yuga that she has kept her promise of bringing him back if he ever gets enslaved by someone else. Yuga is really thankful for Aya and Zushi for coming there to save him, even after how badly he treated them. But he is also surprised that Aya used an SCM just to save him when she is supposed to hate them. As they head back, along the way, Yuga questions Aya what she is going to do with the SCM now that she has successfully rescued him. That's where Aya makes a grand revelation. She says that she is going to keep the hold of SCM for a while as she has changed her mind. Moreover, she expresses to have more slaves now. So, in some alley, Yuga kidnaps a woman from earlier, Sachi Shibuya, and takes her to Aya. There, Aya forces Sachi to have a duel with her and beats her in no time. When she asks Sachi about her master, she reveals him as Takeo Minato, the same guy who wanted to get in Sachi's pants earlier. Meanwhile, the two, Yuga and Zushi, stare at Aya in disbelief. But Aya tells Zushi to not look at her in this way especially. She explains how she realized that SCM is not supposed to exist, and so he plans to make all the users of SCM her slaves, and then get rid of all these SCM devices. For this, Aya needs Yuga's help, who doesn't have much of a say since he is already her slave. I'll leave it to you, Emma. Handle things from here.
How long am I gonna keep saving your sorry ass, Julia stands in Ryu's room, asking him what to do with this mysterious, crazy person. Ryu thinks that his person must be some next level crazy if she is willing to bet everything on one duel. But he is ready for it, and is sure that this is going to be be a very big duel. We then pry more into Julia's story. She was just a shy girl who always wanted to hold someone's hand, but when her parents passed away, she had no hand to hold on to. There came many men in her life who wanted to throw money at her, even beat her, just to do something with her that's inappropriate, but she never found a person she could rely on until she met Seiya. He was the only one who truly cared for her. The two used to spend some jolly good time together. However, that all changed when Ayaka came in Seiya's life. She used to choose Seiya as her host every time. In order to get out of this misery, Seiya chose to enslave Ayaka, but the results came out quite the opposite. Ayaka ended up enslaving Seiya, and just like any other jealous girlfriend, Ayaka envied Julia to her heart's content. With a cold heart, she manipulated Seiya into leaving Julia for good. Moreover, she had even asked him to throw away all of her stuff. Seiya had kicked Julia out of his apartment, broke up with her, and hurt her mentally, and once again, Julia was left without a hand to hold on to. One night, in some bar, Julia got told by the barista that she has a friend who has a place for Julia to live until she can find a permanent residence. This friend's name is Edogawa, and yes, that's Ryuo Edogawa's mother. Later, Julia enters the house but finds no one there. After wandering the house a bit, Julia heads toward an ajar door. Suddenly, a sharp pencil is pointed toward her eye, and the boy is revealed to be Ryu. That's how Julia met him. But Ryu showed no interest in Julia and kept ignoring her. As for the house itself, it always felt empty to Julia since Edogawa used to stay out for her work all day. Julia wanted this house to feel lively and tried every night to befriend Ryu, but to no avail. However, on one fortunate night, Julia decides to give another try to her friendship with Ryu and heads to his room, where she sees him studying about what she thinks are ancient Egyptians. But Ryu explains that it's an Iron Maiden. This is where Ryu decides to take advantage of his knowledge. He asks Julia if she would like to play the counting game with him. Ryu further explains that they both will start counting. The max amount of numbers that they can jump are 3, and the first one who counts to 20 will lose. Moreover, Ryu hands the SCM device to Julia, telling her to place it in her mouth, explaining that the loser will get a shock from it. Feeling obliged to develop a friendship with Ryu, Julia agrees, thinking that a game won't hurt her. As soon as the game begins, Ryu smartly plays his moves. At last, he manages to outsmart Julia and counts to 15, leaving all doors closed for Julia to win the game. When Julia tells Ryu that they are supposed to lose when someone counts till 20, Ryu simply asks her to consider all possibilities. None of them were in Julia's favor, and that's how she became his slave. Ryu then asks Julia to strip for him, and her body starts to move on her own. Julia is confused, but there is nothing she can do. Seeing that the SCM actually works, Ryu asks Julia to take him to Narima's workplace, where his mother Edogawa works. Unfortunately, Ryu is caught by a security guard and left for Narima to deal with. There, Ryu strikes a deal with Narima. He will pay Narima a lump sum amount of 100 million yen for his mother to stop working here. Back at his residence, Ryu is angry, but Julia calms him down, assuring that she will always be there for him. Ryu then asks Julia to strip once again, this time for the camera, as he is planning to bait more people into becoming his slaves. After that, Julia and Ryu snatches slaves one after the other, but none of them knew Ryu's real motive. It was only a secret between him and Julia. In the present, Fujiko and his slaves stand in front of Ryu and his slaves. Both the teams are ready to commence their duel. At first, Ryu lays out the rules of the duel. Both teams consist of a master and 4 slaves, making this a 5-on-5 match. Moreover, if any player's body parts, except of their feet and legs, make contact with the ground, then they are out. Finally, the first team that manages to capture that other territory's flag will win this duel. Soon, the duel commences, and Zenitsu takes on Shiori. However, Shiori smartly baits Zenitsu into stepping on oil and falls down, getting eliminated from the game. Soon, Shiori ends up encountering a trap and getting eliminated as well. Not long after, Ayaka and Meguro eliminate Seiya. Ataru also gets eliminated. The only slave left is Julia, but she activates the current, passes out by herself, rendering the opposing territory unable to capture their flag as the area is flooded with water with current running through it. Meanwhile, Ryu smartly sneaks into the territory base. With no one to stop him, Ryu quite easily grabs the flag and wins the duel. Since this is a hard-earned victory, Ryu even taunts Fujiko for thinking that she would win this duel. After the battle ends, the newly turned slaves approach Julia to appreciate for her smart move, but Fujiko is shocked by the fact that Julia risked her life just for her master's sake, even though it's against SCM's limitation. Somewhere else, it is informed that Ryuo's faction have acquired 5 more slaves. Now, Ryu's faction have 11 slaves in total. Iya has acquired 3 slaves in total, Sachi, Yuga, and Zushi. As for the last faction, it is revealed to be Narima's, and he appears to have Setagaya and a girl named Minami Kita in his faction. Soon, Setagaya arrives and greets Narima. In response, Narima inquires to Setagaya about the business's progress. Ryu is on a video call with his slave team, which has gotten pretty big. There, Fujiko introduces herself as an expert in nursing, but Zenitsu quickly takes offense, mentioning how Fujiko drugged him with a syringe. When Fujiko asks Zenitsu to mind his words, he reminds her that he isn't her slave anymore. Ryu then asks everyone to be quiet and only allows Ataru to speak. Ataru then asks the group if they are familiar with the start sign showing up on the map lately, but no one seems to be aware of it. Ryu knows that no matter who they are, he has to enslave them as they might be a threat. For this, Ataru devises a plan and holds Julia responsible to infiltrate the school and get as much information as she can. Of course, this is no easy task, so Ryu boosts her confidence. Suddenly, Fujiko offers to volunteer as well, and when Ataru tells her that finding a uniform might be a bit difficult for Fujiko, she says that she won't need any. At the school, Julia is trying to peek into a classroom when suddenly she gets approached by 2 friendly girls. While they are having their conversation, Fujiko disguises herself as the school nurse and manages to fetch a lot of data. Just then, Setagaya enters the room, discovering that Ueno has been feeling ill. But Setagaya doesn't mind it, since this is quite a fortunate event for him. Meanwhile, Julia reports back about her talking to a few students, and none of them seem to know anything about SCM. While Julia is in the classroom, Minami Kita enters and introduces herself. Acting intimidatingly, Kita strikes fear into Julia, but before she can take any action, Setagaya arrives, telling Kina to calm down. He then turns to Julia and says that he has been meaning to meet Julia and his master. Backing off from fear, Julia stumbles upon Fujiko, with the former telling Fujiko that they must alert Ataru about this. But none of that would be of use since Setagaya has already made Fujiko his slave. With a snap of his fingers, Setagaya makes Julia lose her consciousness as she passes out. After she wakes up, Setagaya arrives once again, revealing to Julia how he was involved in the making of SCM. He then asks Julia if she is interested to know more about the star SCM and reveals his judgment SCM. However, to display its true potential, Setagaya tries to forcefully make Julia wear her SCM, but she resists. For now, Setagaya leaves her be, reminding her that a slave cannot live normally for much long without their SCMs. Meanwhile, Yuga, Sachi, and Aya decide to go after Narima. Back at Narima's office, Kita expresses her anger over Setagaya not letting her do what she wants. It is then revealed that Kita is actually the one who has enslaved Narima, even though it might seem otherwise. But nothing has changed in Kita's perspective. One day, Kita met Setagaya on the rooftop of her school, and that's where Setagaya handed her over the SCM. Just then, Iya enters the room along with Zushi and challenged Narima to a duel. Eventually, the two accept the duel, but only on one condition. Kata will accompany Iya to make sure she isn't cheating, and Zushi will keep an eye on Narima soon. Aya begins to lay out the rules of the duel. The duel is about who earns the most money in 2 hours. The rules are very simple. None of the players' old money will count. Whatever they earn in the next 2 hours will be considered in the duel. Although the odds are in Narima's favor since he is a businessman, Aya is still confident. As soon as the duel commences, Narima calls his men, asking them to go and collect from local businesses. As for Aya, she chooses to go on the street and start singing, hoping to collect as much money as possible. At the end, Sachi disguises as a normal civilian and leaves a 500,000 yen donation to Aya. Kita knows Aya is using her slaves, but since it's not against the rules, she can do nothing about it. Meanwhile, Yuga disguises himself as a loan shark and meets with Narima. Moreover, Yuga has found himself a new name, Futoda, but Narima ends up seeing past everything and realizes that this guy must be associated with Aya. Futoda then asks Narima to mention his name and sign the contract, and then he can have the 10 million yen as a loan. However, Narima ends up playing Yuga as he writes Aya's name, rendering her to be the responsible person to pay back the loan. He then calls his men as as they start beating on Yuga and ties him up. Meanwhile, Zushi shows disappointment on their failed plan. Not long after, Aya arrives with Kida. She shows astonishment when she sees Yuga lying unconscious on the floor. On the other hand, Nerima begins to laughter in a sinister fashion, showing that he cannot be fooled easily. He doesn't just stop there, he goes so far as to belittle Aya for her foolish plan. But suddenly, an explosion happens inside the bag filled with money, and all the money ends up burning into ashes. Turns out that Yuga has actually placed a bomb with a timer. Nerima then realizes that the money was probably fake as well. Since Aya has manages to accumulate 1 million yen, she comes out on top, as Nerima has only managed to gather 900,000, marking him as the loser. Shortly after, the two, Kada and Nerima, are enslaved by Aya. When Kida questions Aya what she's going to do with them, Yuga explains that Aya wants to free this world from SCM devices. Hearing this, Nerima claps for their courage and is sure that Aya is the only one daring enough to go against Setagaya. Meanwhile, Ryu tries to reach out to her fallen comrades, but there's no result. He then slowly starts to grow worried for Julia's well-being.
Hey guys, I know I'm interrupting the video, but I'm just here to remind you that most of you guys watching this video are not actually subscribed to the channel. So if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you click that subscribe button and hit the notification bell for more updates in the future. Now let's get straight back into the video.
A guy is aimlessly walking down the school hallway, murmuring about his obsession with Maria, a doll-like figure that shows up online, specializing in hearing people's issues. This is the story of Geku Itabashi, an obsessed guy. Later that night, he is sitting on his computer, excitingly talking with Maria, the same doll-like figure. He tells her about his obsession with her and what great lengths he is willing to go for her. Moreover, he mentions all the atrocious things he have done just to get her attention, but Maria keeps turning him down. Later, in the classroom, Geku receives an email from Maria herself stating that he has been selected as the one who can tell Maria about all his worries. In the middle of the session, Geku is unable to bear the excitement of this news as he passes out. Later, Maria gives Geku further instructions about what he has to do. She tells him about a demon residing in his school. Her name is Fujiko, and Geku has to keep an eye on her every move. Shortly after, Geku finds Fujiko in the nursing room, but she's not alone. She's being accompanied by Setagaya. That's when Setagaya traps Fujiko into placing her SCM, and thus Setagaya ends up making her his slave. At first, Fujiko was confused since she didn't even initiate any duel, but Setagaya reveals he doesn't need to have a duel since he uses a special SCM. Feeling like he has failed, Geku immediately leaves the place, screaming that he has encountered a demon. Going to Maria's residence, he bows on the entrances, apologizing to Maria for failing to do what she tasked her with. At first, Maria tells Geku that he is useless, but says that she will forgive him. Approaching him, Maria reveals her real self to Geku, surprising him. She then tells him that there's another task, and asks him to go ahead and set a trap. Moreover, he hands him over an SCM as a reward for his obedience. Geku then assures that he will make sure to stop Ryu by any means. Meanwhile, Ryu arrives near Maria's residence, waiting for his next slave. Soon, Zero reveals himself, and when Ryu asks why he is there, Zero simply says that he was told by Ataru. Just then, Geku arrives and discovers Ryu is there. Moreover, he mistakes Zero for Kyo, Maria's senpai. However, Zero corrects Geku, stating that his name is Zero. He then asks Ryu to stay back, assuring that he will take care of Geku. As soon as Zero approaches Geku, he whispers into his ear that he is indeed Kyo. The two, engaged in a duel of look that way. As expected, Geku ends up being the loser, and Zero enslaves him. Then, Zero approaches Ryu to boast about his victory. However, Ryu senses something suspicious and decides to place his SCM to take Geku in his control. Just when Ryu activates his SCM, Kyo tells Ryu that he has been waiting for this moment. Not long after, Ataru and Nakano arrive. However, Ryu manages to escape from Kyo's grasp. Suddenly, a speedy car arrives, and the driver is revealed to be Maria. Geku and Kyo enter the car and the three leave. Inside the car, Maria apologizes to Kyo for not being of help, but Kyo says that she has done more than enough. In a flashback, we see how one day Zero came to Maria's house to explain that he has somehow managed to merge brains with Kyo. Maria, as expected, doesn't buy this, as she is aware that her master Kyo died a long time ago. But Kyo gives Maria the coordinates to Zero's residence, asking Maria to find a way to get Zero out of harm's way. Discovering a bit more about them, Maria was once actually a cellmate of Kyo, Zero's mother. Inside the jail cell, the two bonded greatly, and that's how their master and apprentice relation came into being. In the present, Maria visits Zero at his residence. There, she questions Zero about dropping his act and asking about who Kyo is, but Zero has no idea. Just then, Kyo takes over Zero, explaining to Maria that Zero has no idea about who Kyo is. Moreover, Kyo explains that she doesn't know how, but somehow she and Zero has merged their brains, and now Zero has two personalities. One is his own, and the second one is of Kyo. Although they have no control over it sometimes, Kyo takes over Zero's body only for a little while. As soon as Kyo senses that it's time for Zero to come out, she alerts Maria about it. After Zero comes back into his body, Maria to calm him down, telling him that she is his counselor. Meanwhile, Ryu is contemplating about the recent events with his two slaves, Nakano and Ataru. Ataru believes that they must have stolen Zero at some point, but Ryu seems to know what's up. He explains it's not the case, and that Zero must be living with dual personalities. At this point, Ataru doesn't even express amazement as he has seen many weird things, and since they haven't managed to make any contact with their two mission slaves, Julia and Fujiko, Ataru suggests that they head back to Ryu's residence and lay low for a while. Meanwhile, Setagaya watches all this happening from hidden cams all around the area. He laughs, wondering why these people think so high of themselves. Moreover, since a lot of them are deciding to gather in one place, he wonders if he should start hunting now. Ataru and other slaves are on a call with Ryu. 3. Ataru mentions about all the recent events that have occurred. He tells Ryu about how Julia and Fujiko were sent to school, and since then there has been no contact with them. Other than that, Meguro was sent to keep a watch around the school parameters, and they have not heard from him either since then. Moreover, Ataru states that the possibility of all three of them being captured and possibly enslaved by someone else are quite high. Furthermore, Ryu's faction has confirmed that there are 3 other forces involved. One of them is Aya's faction, the second one is this Maria that they encountered not too long ago, and the third one and the most mysterious one is the star SCM that has appeared on the map. Nothing is known about this star SCM as of now. Ataru then asks Ryu what they should do next. To this, Ryu asks his slaves to leave everything to him, surprising them. Ataru then asks Ryu if he is fine, since he hasn't been showing up much since Julia has gone missing. Ryu then asks his slave not to worry about him, since he hasn't ordered them to do that. Ending the phone call, Ryu heads to wander around the house. During that, he reminisces about the special time he used to spend with his mother. Shortly after, a couple of men from Narima Caching knocks on Edogawa's door. One of the guys hands over his card to Ryu, telling him to ask his mother to call them. After the loan sharks leave, Ryu decides to pay his mom a visit at his workplace, and as expected, he sees her working there. Coming back to his home, Ryu spends the night all alone, sleeping on his couch without even having his dinner. Later, he thinks about the day when he met Julia. He recalls every single detail about that, how it happened, and how at first he was cold toward Julia. Then he tried to use the SCM on her and found out that it actually works. Of course, he then decided to get as many slaves as possible to make sure that he can gather enough money to free his mother from her workplace. However, a strange phenomenon occurred. Julia started to take care of Ryu by herself, such as making him lunch and dinner on time. Ryu didn't even ask her to, but she continued to feel attached toward him. That's when we discover about Ryu's true motive behind all this. Going back to the event when he was caught by the security and was sent to Narima, Narima told Ryu that he will have to pay him 100 million yen. After that, Ryu went back to his house. This is where he decides that it is better if he can just end Narima's life. This would be an easier way for him to rescue his mother. Coming back to the present, present, Ryu is minding his own business in the library. Suddenly, Aya approaches him and offers a donut, not knowing Ryu's true identity. As Aya proceeds to leave, Ryu asks to replace the donuts, as he doesn't trust her. Ryu then leaves the library and soon receives a phone call from Ataru, who informs that they are going to rescue Julia and Fujiko, assuring Ryu not to worry anymore. Back in the basement, Ataru and others manage to capture Meguro, who is at his usual spot. They have stripped him off of his clothes, ready to torture him to get him to talk about his current master. Soon, they realize that they haven't checked Meguro's undergarment, thinking that there might be some information. Inside there, they find a piece of paper, where the next location for a meetup is mentioned. Following the location, Ataru and others surround the area completely, leaving Setagaya and Fujiko in the middle. At first, Setagaya pretends to be scared and acts as if these slaves have smartly beaten him. Ataru even asks Setagaya to give up and become his slave, but then Setagaya discovers that they haven't brought their master. So, he proceeds to enslave all of them with just a single snap of his fingers. Setagaya thinks that he have won the lottery since he didn't expect to enslave this many people at once. Setagaya then contacts Ryu, showing how he has enslaved all of his people. Moreover, Julia seems to have given up as well. When Ataru questions why he is doing all this, Setagaya reveals that he put these devices into the market for a reason. Simply put, all these people were planned to experiment subjects. After the phone call ends, Setagaya sends Ryu a picture of Aya being treated badly. Back at Maria's apartment, she is thinking about ways to set Zero free. At last, she decides to use SCM on herself and force Zero into becoming her slave, so she can free her and fulfill Kyo's wish. Just when Maria puts on her SCM, she feels a vibration. However, Zero's SCM isn't activated. At first, Maris gets a bit frightened, but soon realizes that it might be coming from Geku's SCM, so she proceeds to head out to scold Geku about being so careless. However, to her surprise, her suspicion at first was correct. A guy with a slingshot knocks Maria down and begins telling his story. When Maria interrupts his story, he brutally kicks her in the guts. Soon, he forces Maria into accepting a duel. The game is for Maria to dodge this guy's last bullet, but Maria ends up being too slow and loses the duel as the guy comments that he is going to enslave everyone. Yuga and Aya listen to Narima patiently as he explains about how Setagaya enslaves people. He also explains to them about the Judgment SCM and how it can make people turn to slaves without them accepting the duel. Moreover, Narima reveals about how Setagaya approached him after he was enslaved by Kada. Thereafter, he just snapped his finger and Narima felt a sense of loss, and before long, he turns into his slave. But Setagaya then asks Narima to pretend in front of Kita as if he is her slave. Ia then asks Narima if Setagaya gave him any other orders. Without taking any time, Narima reveals how Setagaya had asked him to start a business of buying and selling slaves. When Narima said that no master would willingly give him their slaves, Setagaya told him only to accept duels from those who come to him. Moreover, he even offers Narima to use his Judgment SCM. In this way, Narima can earn a lot of money, whereas Setagaya can get more data on SCM devices. In the present, Yuga is astonished with the Judgment SCM, deeming it as an invincible piece of tech. However, Aya quickly realizes that it's not visible, or else Setagaya would be going around turning people into slaves by himself. Soon, Kita arrives and questions about Sachi's whereabouts. Hearing this, Ia also realizes that it's been long and Sachi hasn't returned. Just then, Yuga receives a notification from Setagaya with a picture of Sachi in captivity. Moreover, Setagaya has asked them to come to the warehouse if they want their slave back. Ia then turns to Narima and asks what someone would do in this situation. Narima explains that Setagaya would keep the captive for as long as possible as leverage to get the master to come and rescue their slave. Ia then realizes that there's one way they can pull this off. She believes if they manage to rescue Sachi before the meeting time, they can actually succeed. Ia even asks Narima if he would help them. In response, Narima tells Ia that girls like her are his type. At the warehouse, Ataru and his men capture two person, thinking they are Kita and Yuga, but they have been mistaken. Meanwhile, they have managed to sneak into the warehouse where Sachi is actually kept. Sachi then points them to a barrel, asking them to get keys from there. But as soon as she apologizes to them, a trapdoor opens beneath them, causing them to fall. Soon, Setagaya arrives and boasts about his cunningness, mocking Yuga and Kout for falling prey to his trap. However, Ia has managed to escape, but Setagaya doesn't worry too much about that since it wouldn't be a big deal to catch her. Soon, Narima's men receive order to search for Aya as well. Meanwhile, Aya receives a message from Yuga with a phone number. Back at Setagaya's, he proceeds to have a meal privately with Fujiko. There, he appreciates her for her word work. Moreover, he explains to Fujiko that his judgment SCM actually tricks the brain into thinking that the other person has lost, and once the people thinks that way, they become enslaved to him. After the meal, Setagaya heads to the restroom. Just then, the same guy who enslaved Maria arrives all of a sudden and smashes Setagaya's head against the mirror. Not long after, Setagaya realizes that the guy behind the mask is none other than Taiko. Setagaya even tries to use his judgment SCM, but it's of no use since none of Taiko's slaves are wearing any SCM. As for himself, he has never been enslaved before. Soon, Fujiko arrives and Setagaya starts begging her to help. This is when Taiko challenges Setagaya to a duel. The game goes like this. Taiko will give Setagaya some statements, and if Setagaya guesses any of them wrongly, he loses. Taiko then reveals that he was told by Fujiko about Setagaya's whereabouts and all the other related information to the judgment SCM. However, Setagaya doesn't believe this and loses the duel, since this was true. We then get more into Taiko's life. He has always been looked down by everyone around him. On daily basis, he sees a lot of beautiful girls around him, but none are interested in him. One day, while he was walking down the street, a friend from work approaches Taiko, offering to hang out. At that time, Taiko and his friend met with Julia and Sachi. However, Taiko was more interested in Julia instead of Sachi, but the latter ended up losing the game of Daifugo and was forced to become Taiko's slave. That night, Taiko shared bedtime with Sachi without her consent. He even treated her badly, ordering her to give him all the money that she earns from now on. Eventually, Sachi also started ignoring Taiko, and that's when he decided to begin his villain arc. First, he enslaved Maria as she was the easiest target. Then he lied to Fujiko that he was Shinosuke's acquaintance and baited her into becoming his slave. And now, he has come here to further his plans. In the present, Taiko asks the injured Setagaya if he has the most amount of slaves now. Setagaya reveals to Taiko that he has a total of 18 slaves now, and the most amount anyone has currently. Ayaka is running for her life as Taiko is playing a game of hunter and the hunted with them. He is truly treating them as his slaves. Moreover, he makes them an offer. If they manage to escape, they will be free. But these good-for-nothing slaves can do nothing as they are all exhausted and some are even injured. Meanwhile, Aya decides to call the number that Yuga left for her. As she calls on the number, it turns out to be Shinosuke on the other side of the phone call. Aya and Shinosuke then decide to meet at the library where they first met. There, Aya tells Shinosuke about all the events that have taken place since their last meetup. Moreover, Aya asks for Shinosuke's help to rescue Yuga. Shinosuke then reveals how he and Yuga actually met each other. Yuga was all beaten up, and Shinosuke actually saved his life and told Yuga that he is going to keep some of his money. In response, Yuga told Shinosuke to keep all of it. Thereafter, Yuga came up with an idea, asking Shinosuke if he wants to earn more money. Moreover, Yuga suggested that they work together. That's when the two decided to do some business together. But the plan failed when Yuga took those 10 million yen that they have saved and ran away. Back in the present, Shinosuke tells Aya how things started to change when he was focusing on the business, and Yuga, on the other hand, got obsessed with SCMs. Shinosuke soon agrees to help Aya as he has some matters to settle with Yuga. Shinosuke then asks Aya about this Setagaya guy. She explains how Setagaya tricked Ryu's slaves and enslaved them, but at last, he got tricked and got enslaved as well by some guy named Takio. He then asks Aya about her plan to carry out her mission, prompting Aya to reveal that she will figure out it. However, when they actually start to think about a plan, none of them has any idea how they're going to pull this off. Just then, Ryu arrives, offering to help them. Meanwhile, Taiko is still busy in treating his slaves harshly, mocking them constantly. He then asks Setagaya how many SCMs are there in total, prompting him to reveal that there are 23. Moreover, the only 3 ones that are left to be enslaved are Aya, Ryuo, and Geku. As for the 23rd SCM, Shinosuke actually sold it to someone. Soon, Aya, Shinosuke, and Ryu begin their plan. All of a sudden, Aya sneak up to Taiko from behind, holding him hostage against a taser. Simultaneously, we are shown Ryu helping Aya and Shinosuke with the plan. He says that their primary goal is to get Taiko to challenge Aya, since he would definitely try to use Judgment SCM. Since it won't work on Aya, she is the perfect candidate for this. At the same time, Ryu is watching the area from a certain angle. On the other hand, Shinosuke appears to be acting activating timers on various bombs that have been scattered in every corner of the warehouse. Soon, Ryu warns Shinosuke as 3 men, Meguro, Zenichi, and Yuga, are heading their way. At the very last moment, Shinosuke manages to trigger all the bombs and hides. However, he gets spotted by Yuga, who asks the 2 other slaves to search somewhere else. Meanwhile, Aya challenges Taiko to a duel, and the first one to beg for their life loses. At first, Taiko doesn't accept the challenge, but soon Meguro and Zenichi arrive from behind and holds Aya. Taiko is totally surprised by the 2 ambushing Aya, since he ordered them to search for any intruders. Turning around, Taiko kicks Setagaya, telling him how he should have made a move to defend his master as well. Then Taiko accepts Aya's challenge, wearing his SCM at the same time. Meanwhile, Shinosuke comes out and sees that Yuga is waiting for him as he tells Shinosuke that he wasn't hiding very well. Soon, the bombs start going off one after the other, and the slaves inside the building begin to panic. Since they are all on the floors beneath, none of them listens to Taiko when he orders them to come to the 3rd floor, as it might endanger their lives. At the same time, Shinosuke manages to escape from the building, but Yuga continues to chase him. The 2 then engage in a fight, and Shinosuke tries his best not to hurt his dear friend. When Yuga starts to get the upper hand, he tells Shinosuke that he never expected him to come for his rescue. That's when Shinosuke expresses his love for Yuga as a brother, remembering the time when Yuga made sure to risk his life and get Shinosuke out of harm's way. Yuga is then knocked back to his senses and reveals the actual location of the entrapped women. Shinosuke is then quickly asked to rush to the 3rd floor and help Aya escape. Meanwhile, on the 3rd floor, Taiko has no idea why Aya is not begging for her life. Soon, Zero enters the room, grabs the keys from Taiko's pocket, and uncuffs Aya, rendering her free. Taiko then decides to make an escape through the front door, but Shinosuke ends up blocking his path. He then turns to Aya, asking about her plan to get out of this building. However, Aya reveals that she never thought of a plan for this. So, Shinosuke stares at the window, realizing that the only way for them is to jump. He then holds Zero in his left hand, Taiko in his right hand, while Aya latches on his back as the 4 make the jump. Frightened, Taiko begins begging for his life mid-air, and thus loses the duel against Aya. Meanwhile, Ryu makes his way to the locked-up women, but is unable to gather enough strength to burst open the door. Soon, Seiya and Ataru arrive at just the right time, with the latter asking Ryu to let the adults help him for once. The 2 then manage to open the door, and Ryu is immensely happy to see Julia alive and well, along with others. In the midst of all this, Setagaya manages to escape. As for the slaves, Aya decides to free them all, thus fulfilling her promise to get rid of all the SCMs. Later, Julia approaches Ryu, assuring that they are going to get his mother out of her workplace, even though the SCMs are gone. Just then, Narima has a change of heart and offers Ryu to get her mother out of the business he owns, as a reward for helping him.
Just like Game of Thrones, the main thing that everyone wanted their hands on got destroyed by the mighty power of justice. You can thanks Aya Arakawa for that. Well, folks, that marks the end of this video. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell icon to stay updated. See you guys in the next one.